there. Thanks for stopping by Max's Cards and Dice Dugout. This is episode 160. And this time out, we are at Metropolitan Stadium in Bloomington, Minnesota for game number 4 of the 1968 Minnesota Vikings Project. We're using Momentum Football from Downey Games. Before we get to the start of the game, let's take a look at the Vikings season thus far. They're at a record of 1-1-1. In their last game against the Bears, they came back late and salvaged the tie to prevent having a losing record. Now, as far as their statistics go, after 3 games, Bill Brown leads the team with 170 yards and 2 touchdowns in the rushing department. Gene Washington, 13 catches, 250 yards, 4 touchdowns. Passing has been all Joe Capps thus far in the season. Sort of so-so, I would say. 5 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. He has been sacked 8 times, so the offensive line needs to up their game a bit there. On the defensive side, we have 1 interception each for Paul Krause and Ed Schrockman. Jim Lindsay has a fumble recovery. They were not recording individual sacks in 1968, but the team has recorded 5 thus far. And in the kicking department, Fred Cox on extra points has been perfect, 9 for 9. And 5 for 6 on field goals with a long of 45. So I've already made all of the required rolls and determined the defensive control factors for each team. The starting quarterbacks for this game for the Lions will be Bill Munson, and Joe Kapp gets the start for Minnesota. Kicker for Detroit is Wayne Walker, with King Hill doing the punting duties for the Vikings. The Vikings do start this game with a 0 momentum home advantage, and we'll roll to see who gets the opening kickoff. Before I do that, speaking of kickoffs, the Lions do have a chance for a kickoff return for a touchdown with Lem Barney. It's a very slim chance, but they do have it, and the same could be said for the Vikings on punt returns with Charlie West. All right, so first we'll determine who gets the opening kickoff. Blue is the Vikings, white is the Lions. And the Vikings will get the opening possession. And we are underway. Take 1 off for the kickoff. 5 and 1 is another 6 off the clock. And 9, 13, 14 is 12, 54. We have a 5, which does fall within the Lions' defensive range, and 45 off of their defensive chart is a key penalty to start this game. And I have to refresh my memory on that. You don't get that too often. The penalty call is always in favor of the team holding momentum. It's a 0, so that nod goes to the home team, the Vikings. So it's against the offense, and there must be a punt by Detroit. So we'll check to see if Charlie West returns this for a touchdown, and that's a no. And a key penalty is a momentum-changing play, so the Vikings will go +1. Or excuse me, Detroit. I'm checking Charlie West, and it wasn't it wasn't the Vikings who were receiving the punt. Well, Detroit does not have the opportunity to return a punt for a touchdown, but they do pick up momentum based on that key penalty. So we got a 6 and a 1 for 7 off the clock. And 13, 14, so at 10:34. We have a 9. That does not fall within the Vikings' defensive control, so we're going to look at Detroit's offensive chart, and a 41 is a punt. Okay, and now we'll check to see if Charlie West returns a punt for a touchdown. And that's a no. So the momentum stays with the Lions. The Vikings have the ball for their second possession. 5 and a 3 is 8 off the clock. Uh, 13, 16, 7:56. We have a 9. That does not fall within Detroit's defensive control factor. And a 43 on the red and white. So we're looking at the Vikings offensive chart. A 43 is a key reception. And they have the Vikings have the opportunity to keep the drive alive. We got to roll all 4 dice, and the blue and yellow, we get a 61. And looking at the Vikings reception, red and white die is 54, and that would be Bill Brown, and a 61. Falls into a punt. So the key reception does not result in a first down, and the Vikings have to punt. So momentum does stay with the Lions. They'll get the ball back. Halfway through the first quarter, we're scoreless. Got a 5 and a 1 for 6 off the clock. 10, 11, 14. That'd be 5:54. And we have a 6. That does fall within Minnesota's defensive control factor. And a 35 will be a punt. Check for a punt return for a touchdown. No. So momentum stays with the Lions, and the Vikings have the ball. 4 and a 1 for 5 off the clock. Yeah, that's at 4:08 in the first. Have a 3, or excuse me, a 2 on the blue and yellow. That does fall. Excuse me. That does fall within Detroit's defensive control factor. And 24, and Joe Cap is sacked again. And that is a 6-yard loss. The Vikings will have to punt. And that is a momentum changing play. So Detroit is now +2 on momentum. Next possession, 6 and a 2 for 8 off the clock. We got 10, 16, 18. 138 in the second. We have a 10 that does fall within the Vikings defensive control, and a 62. It's a touchdown run for the Lions. And let's see who scored that. 46. Billy Gambrell. And we'll check for the extra point. Wayne Walker is automatic on the extra point, so we'll just roll that for the heck of it, and that is good. And the Lions lead 7-0. Late in the first quarter, They already have +2 on momentum, so that does not come into effect here. And next possession for the Vikings is a 5 and a 3 for 8 off the clock. +1 for the kickoff. And we have a 9, 12, 15, 13, 53. Got a 7, which is where the momentum comes into play. You have to excuse me. I have a cold. But anyway, in a blue and yellow roll of 7, that's where the momentum factor comes in. So Detroit has the momentum, so we're going to look at their defensive chart. And on a 53, it's a field goal attempt for Fred Cox. All right, so Cox is good on a field goal from 11 to 46. And it's no good. He missed that one. And let's see, it was 24, 25, 26, plus 17, 36, 43-yarder he missed. And the score remains 7-0. Detroit already has full momentum, so that does not change anything there, but they do get the ball back. And we got a 6 and a 2 for 8 off the clock. (11, 13, 17). It's at 11-17 in the second. 10 does fall within the Vikings' defensive control, and a 52 is a field goal attempt. And this is Wayne Walker. He's good on an 11 to 33. And it's no good. And that field goal was 36, 38, 43, which is his long. It's actually more than 43, but his long on his chart is 43. So score still remains 7-0, but that does change the momentum back 1 tick for the Vikings. See if they can capitalize on this. We got a 6 and a 4 for 10 off the clock. (10, 16, 21). So that would be at 7:41. We have a 10 that does not fall within Detroit's defensive control, and a 65 off the Vikings chart is a touchdown pass. And that's Cap 2. Gene Washington again, his 5th touchdown of the season. And that's going to be a 9-yard reception. Extra point from Cox is good. We are tied at 7. And momentum shifts back to neutral. All right, next possession for the Lions. Got a 3 and a 1 for 4 off the clock. 6, 7, 9. At 6:29 in the second. We have a 5, blue and yellow. That does fall within Minnesota's defensive control. And a 31 is a quarterback sack. And that is for a 5-yard loss. And that does change momentum back to the Vikings with 1 tick. Next possession. Oh, actually, no. This is the punt return, because that does result in a punt. And the punt return was not for a touchdown. So we got 6 and 1 for 7 off the clock, which I think I already did. No, I did not. That's 12, 13, 18. So at 4:18 in the second, we have an 11. That does fall within Detroit's defensive control. And a 61 is a touchdown run. So the Vikings are going to take the lead here right before the half. And scoring that touchdown is Joe Kapp. Was it a scramble to avoid a sack, or was it a design play? All right, so now we got to roll all 4 dice. Actually, no, we already rolled the, you have to excuse me. All right. Got to roll to see how long of a touchdown run it was, and it was a 6-yarder. If these dice were equal, we would look at the long, there's a long rating on the team card for each player, but when they're not equal, you just total up the dice, so it's a 6-yard run. And the PAT from Fred Cox, we'll check that now. That's good. And it's now 14-7 in favor of the Vikings, with momentum shifting to +2 for Minnesota. All right, so time's winding down here. At the end of the first half, we got a 3 and a 1 for 4. And 4, 7, 8 would be 248 in the second. 4 does fall within Minnesota's defensive control, and 22 is an interception. Now we got to see. First, we have to determine if it's run back for a touchdown. And that would be true on an 11-33. Or excuse me, an 11-13. It's a 51, so that's not true. And the interception was local boy Ed Shirachman, his second of the season. Vikings already have +2 on momentum, so that won't change. But they get the ball. Possession. 5 and a 2 for 7 off the clock. At 9, 11, 14, 34 seconds. At the end of the second quarter here, 5, that does fall within Detroit's defensive control, and a 45 is a key penalty. Well, the key penalty always favors the team with momentum. Right now, that is the Vikings. And I think we have to re-roll. I get a free dice roll, and the defensive control factor is ignored. And let's see what we get there. 63 off the Vikings offense is a touchdown pass. So Detroit commits a penalty, keeps the Vikings drive alive, and they end up with a TD pass. And that's cap. And that's going to end the half, because we have to add the lowest die roll too. But let's resolve this first. It's cap to 13. Gene Washington, another touchdown for Washington. And it was a 5-yarder. Cox for the extra point. It's good. And it's now 21-7. And the Vikings scored that touchdown as time expired at the end of the first half. So 21 points from the Vikings in the second quarter. And at halftime, they lead the Lions 21-7. Now, Detroit does get the ball to start the third. Take one off the clock. And conduct their first drive. Actually, we're checking for a kick return for a touchdown. That does not happen, so we'll roll again. And we got 6 and 1 for 7 off the clock. $12:37 in the third. Let's see, we have a 6 that does fall within the Vikings' defensive control, and a 64. And a 64 is going to be a touchdown pass. And that'll be Munson. To 66. Mel Farr. And because we rolled doubles, we have to look on Mel Farr's long. That would be seven times 2. Right. Or excuse me, 2 dice. That's 6 times 7 is 42. So that was a long touchdown, a 42-yarder. And we'll kick the extra point. And for Wayne Walker, that's good. So it's now 21-14 in favor of the Vikings, and momentum shifts 1 back to Detroit. Okay, kickoff to the Vikings. No chance for a return, but we'll take 1 off the clock. And their next possession is a 6 and a 1 for 7 off the clock. We got 7, 12, 14, 9, 54. 7 falls, or excuse me, a 7 goes to the team with momentum. That's the Vikings. It's 25 coming off of their offensive chart, and Joe Cap is sacked again for 7 yards. And the Vikings have to punt. No chance of a punt return for the Lions, but momentum shifts back to neutral. And we continue on in the third here. Vikings lead 21-7. Got a 5-1 for 7 off the clock. And 9, 11, 12, 7:32. 9 does not fall within the Vikings' defensive control. So we look at the offensive chart for the Lions, and a 12 is a fumble. And the Vikings cannot return a fumble for a touchdown, but it does change momentum back their way. 1 mark. We continue on in the third. Vikings lead 21-14. 6-1 for 7 off the clock. And 9, 14, 15 at 5:15 in the third. We get an 11, so that is going to come off of Detroit's defense. Defensive control, and a 13 is a fumble. So the Vikings return the favor their next possession. And should have checked who recovered the fumble for the Vikings. I'm not keeping stats for any team besides the Vikings, but let me see who recovered that fumble. And that was a 23. Bobby Bryant. So. But anyway, back to the matter at hand. The Vikings fumble and momentum goes back to neutral. Detroit has the ball here late in the third quarter with a chance to tie the game. And we have a 5-1 for 6 off the clock. So at 3:09. 6 does fall within Minnesota's defensive control, and a 21 is another interception. And let's see who had that. And 25 is Paul Krause. So both he and Sherrockman have 2 interceptions on the season. That's going to shift momentum back. +1 for the Vikings. And their next possession. At a 5-1 for 6. This is at 1:11 in the third. 6 does fall within Detroit's defensive control, and a 32 is a punt. No chance for a punt return for the Lions, so we move on. Momentum is still +1 for the Vikings. And a 5 and a 2 for 7 off the clock. It's going to take us into the fourth quarter. (14-15) in the fourth. Seven goes to the team with momentum. That's the Vikings. 44 off of their defensive chart is a punt. And we'll check to see if it's returned for a touchdown. That's no. So we continue on with the Vikings drive. Six and a 1 for 7 off the clock. And there was no scoring in the third. Let's see here. We got an 11. That is going to fall within Detroit's defensive control. Let me get the time first here. 11, 12, 16, 11:56. As I said, we're going to be looking at Detroit's defensive control, and a 14 is an interception. So Joe Cap throws an interception. And let's see who recovered that. Well, first we got to check to see if it's run back for a touchdown. No. And it is the interception isn't recovered, but it's made by Lem Barney, Hall of Famer. And that shifts momentum back to neutral. Detroit has the ball down by a touchdown. They trail 21-14 here early in the fourth quarter. So we got a 3 and a 1 for 4 off the clock. This is at 10:28. We have a 3 that does fall within the Vikings' defensive control, and a 32 is a punt. So the Vikings stop them again. See if that comes back for a touchdown. No. So we'll roll for the Vikings' next possession. Got a 5 and a 2 for 7. 16, 8-16 in the fourth. Have a 9. That does not fall within Detroit's defensive control. So 25 off of the Vikings' offensive chart. And once again, Bud Grant's, there's steam coming out of his ears on the sideline because Joe Cap was sacked again. That's 3 this game, 11 for the season. And that was for a 9-yard loss. And that shifts momentum to the Lions. Still only trailing by a touchdown. About halfway through the fourth quarter. Got a 6 and 1 for 7 off the clock. 5:52. We have a 5 that falls within the Vikings' defensive control factor, and a 61 is going to be a touchdown run. And running that one in. It's Mel Farr again. And that was for 12. Oh, no. We got to roll again because it's doubles on the blue and yellow. And let's see how long of a touchdown run this one was. He already had a 42-yard touchdown run earlier in this game. This one's 32. So Farr breaks one open again. And now we'll kick the extra point. This game is tied at 21. Detroit has +2 on momentum. Okay, so we'll take 1 off the clock for the kickoff. Vikings can't return this for a touchdown. Let's see how their possession goes. Got a 6 and a 3 for 9. Time is winding down here. 2:36 to go in the game. And 9 does not fall within Detroit's defensive control. So we're coming off of the offensive chart, and it's a 34 for a punt. Punt cannot be returned for a touchdown, but Detroit still holds the momentum. And the ball late in the game with a chance to win this. Got a 5 and a 2 for 7 off the clock. A 9 does not fall within the Vikings' defensive control. So we'll look on Detroit's offensive chart with 14 seconds to go in the game. And Munson is sacked, which is going to shift momentum back. But the Vikings are going to run out of time here. Although there is a slight chance of a punt return for a touchdown. Let's see if that happens. It does not. And this is just mathematical here. The time runs out on the Vikings. And it's the end of the game. And this one ends in a tie. I said Detroit didn't score in the third quarter, but they did. Vikings were kept off the board the entire second half. This one ends in a tie, 21-21, second tie in a row at home for the Vikings, and their record goes to 1-1-2. Keys to this game: 1, 2, 3. 3 sacks of Joe Cap. Stop drives for the Vikings. Yes, the Vikings did also record a few sacks. Looks like 2. But their record goes to 1-1-1, or excuse me, 1-1-2. They have not won a game at home yet. And now they go on the road for 3, down to New Orleans for game number 5 to play the Saints. Well, that's going to do it for this episode. If you hung out with me, I appreciate it. And I have to apologize for the couple little mental errors I made. Not remembering to check for kickoff or punt returns for touchdowns. But that's going to do it for this episode. I'll be back again in the near future with another one. And until then, take care.